The sky over the colony of Lumeris turned red as enemy ships descended. The people had lived in peace for generations, their homes built along wide rivers and under the shade of tall blue-leafed trees. They had no real army, only a small defense, force meant to stop pirates or wild beasts. But this was different. The raiders came in black and silver ships, their hulls bristling with weapons. They bombed the outskirts first, turning farms into fields of fire. Alien families ran into the streets, clutching whatever they could carry, their eyes wide with fear. In the council chamber, Governor Tilra stood before a large holographic map of the colony. Red markers spread across it like an infection. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "We cannot hold them. Send the distress signal now." The communications officer hesitated. "Governor, to whom should we send it? The Galactic Council is far away. They may not—" "To everyone," Tilra interrupted. "If anyone can hear us, we need help." The officer nodded and tapped at the controls. A repeating message left. "The planet, sent in every known language and code, to any friendly vessel, Lumeris is under attack. Our defenses are failing. Civilians are in danger. We beg for aid." In space, far beyond the colony's borders, the signal traveled through dust clouds, past asteroid belts, and into the dark reaches of what the Galactic Council called the Red Zone. Most avoided that area. It was home to worlds considered too dangerous for civilized life. Storms of ice and fire, predators larger than vehicles, and people who had adapted to survive them. Aboard the human strike ship Iron Fang, Captain Mason sat in the command chair, sipping bitter coffee from a dented mug. The crew was small, barely, 20 humans, each with their own scars and strange stories. Most wore patched uniforms and carried weapons that looked homemade but deadly. The distress call came through in a burst of static. The ship's comm officer, a tall woman named Harris, frowned and ran the signal through translation. "Captain, we've got a distress call. Alien colony named Lumeris. They say they're under heavy attack. Requesting aid from anyone." Mason set his mug down. "Anyone, huh? Where are they?" Harris brought up a star map. "About 3 jumps from here, Council Space, Outer Rim." The engineer, a bearded man named Rogers, grunted. "You know what that means. By the time the Council sends a fleet, those people will be ash." The ship fell silent for a moment. Everyone knew how the galaxy worked. The Council helped those who had political value. A small farming colony far from the core worlds. Not worth the fuel. Mason leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the map. "Course to Lumeris." Harris blinked. "Sir, we're just one ship, and they didn't ask specifically for us. They probably don't even know humans exist in that sector." "They said anyone," Mason replied. "Looks like we qualify." There was no argument after that. Orders on the Iron Fang were not given lightly, but once given, they were followed. The ship's engines roared to life, and the stars outside streaked into lines as they jumped to faster-than-light travel. On Lumeris, the situation worsened. The raiders had broken through the outer defense lines. Small fighter craft strafed the city streets, forcing people to hide in basements or caves. Governor Tilra stood on a balcony overlooking the main square. Smoke rose in the distance. Her aide rushed to her side. "No response yet," he said quietly. "Governor, we may have to consider surrender. The raiders want supplies, and they will not stop at supplies," she said firmly. "You've seen what they do to those who yield. No, we fight until help arrives." "If help arrives," the aide whispered. 3 days passed. Every hour the colony lost more ground. The distress signal kept repeating, but no answer came. Until suddenly their sensor officer called out from the control tower, "Unidentified vessel approaching. Small craft, high speed, heading straight for the colony." Tilra rushed to the console. "Is it more raiders?" The officer shook his head slowly. "No. The signature doesn't match anything in our database. It's Strange. The hull. Composition is uneven, almost like it's been rebuilt multiple times, and the engines are overpowered for its size. Before Tilra could respond, the Galactic Council liaison, who had been stationed on Lumeris as an observer, stepped forward with a pale expression. That is a human ship. Tilra frowned. Humans? I've heard the name, but... Deathworlders. The liaison interrupted, his voice tense. They come from a planet where everything tries to kill you. Weather, animals, even the ground itself. Their biology is built for survival. Their minds, unpredictable. Some call them heroes. Others call them dangerous. They don't fight like us. They fight to win, no matter the cost. In the distance, high above the burning skies, a small black shape emerged from faster-than-light travel. The Iron Fang slowed, its hull glinting in the sun, patched with different metals, some painted with strange human symbols. Inside the ship, Captain Mason stood at the front of the bridge. "Harris, open a channel to the colony." A moment later, Tilra's voice came, through, weary but determined. "Unidentified vessel, this is Governor Tilra of Lumeris. Identify yourself." "Captain Mason, human strike ship Iron Fang," he replied. "We got your message. Hold the line. We're coming in hot." Before she could ask more, the comm cut off. The human ship accelerated, heading straight for the largest cluster of raider ships. Alien civilians hiding in the streets looked up as a dark streak crossed the sky, engines screaming like a beast on the hunt. A moment later, the sound of weapons fire rolled across the city. For the first time in days, the raiders were not the only ones bringing destruction. And somewhere deep inside, the people of Lumeris felt something they hadn't felt since the attack began. Hope. The Iron Fang closed in on the raider fleet like a predator diving toward prey. The human ship was small compared to the massive, sleek warships the raiders used, but its movements were sharp, almost reckless. It darted between incoming fire. Instead of retreating, weaving through bursts of plasma and missile trails, on the bridge, Captain Mason stood with one hand gripping the railing. "Rogers, give me everything you've got in the engines. I want this ship dancing." Rogers smirked. From engineering control. "Already ahead of you, Captain. Pushing red line." The hum of the Iron Fang's engines deepened, and the entire ship seemed to lurch forward, twisting through the chaos. In the colony's control tower, Governor Tilra and her officers watched the battle on their large holodisplay. The human vessel's strange flight pattern made no sense to them. Its constant changes of direction and speed seemed random, almost sloppy. "They're going to get themselves destroyed," one of her military advisors muttered. The Galactic Council liaison shook his head slowly. "No, this is how they fight. Unpredictable. They don't think like we do. They think like hunters. They don't just attack the enemy's ships. They attack their minds." As if to prove his point, the Iron Fang suddenly cut power to its forward. Thrusters, drifting sideways between two raider frigates. While still sliding, it unleashed a volley of railgun fire that ripped through one ship's engines. Before the other frigate could react, the Iron Fang rolled under its belly and fired upward, punching holes straight through the hull. The raiders scrambled to adapt, but every move they made was met with something unexpected. Inside the Iron Fang, crew members shouted updates over the roar of weapons fire. Boarding drones prepped. "Forward railgun cooling down." "Plasma turret is overheating, switching to manual aim." Mason moved to the weapons console. "Harris, open me a channel to the raiders' lead ship." Seconds later, a grainy image appeared on the comm. Screen, an alien with scarred skin, sharp teeth, and eyes filled with anger. "Who dares interfere with our claim?" The raider captain growled. "Captain Mason, Iron Fang," the human replied calmly. "You're attacking a civilian colony. Stand down and leave, or we take you apart piece by piece." The raider captain laughed, a harsh, rasping sound. "You think one little ship can stop us?" Mason's expression didn't change. "Try me." The comm cut off, and before the raiders could react, the Iron Fang surged forward and slammed a heavy missile into the enemy flagship's shields. The explosion lit up the sky above Lumerus, and debris rained down like falling stars. On the surface, civilians peered from their hiding places, watching the human ship fight like something out of legend. Whispers spread quickly. Some couldn't believe such a small vessel was holding back an entire fleet. Others simply stared in awe at the courage of its crew. In the control tower, Tilra turned to the liaison. "You said humans were dangerous? Is this what you meant?" The liaison gave a slow nod. "And they haven't even shown you the worst of it yet." Aboard the Iron Fang, the battle was far from over. The raiders regrouped, sending their fastest interceptors to swarm the human ship. Plasma bolts tore through the void, some glancing. "Off the Iron Fang's patched armor. Mason's shield's at 60%, Harris called out. "That's fine. Bring us into knife range." Rogers laughed from engineering. "Oh, this is going to be fun." The Iron Fang dove straight into the swarm, dodging some shots and taking others head-on. At this range, the humans switched to close-range weapons, rotary cannons, guided micromissiles, and even grappling harpoons. Several raider interceptors were shredded in seconds, their remains drifting in burning clouds. But Mason wasn't satisfied. "Rogers, prep the breach team. We're boarding their flagship." "With this many ships still on us?" Harris asked. "Exactly. They'll never expect it." Within minutes, the Iron Fang latched onto the raider flagship's hull with magnetic clamps. Boarding tubes slammed into place, and human marines in worn but reinforced armor charged through. Inside the flagship, chaos erupted. Humans moved fast, using smoke grenades and shock charges to disorient the defenders. Their armor wasn't as shiny as Council soldiers' gear, but it was built for brutal survival. Back in the colony, Tilra received the boarding report from her sensors. They're inside the raider ship, with less than 20 people. The liaison almost smiled. When humans board, numbers stop mattering. Mason himself led part of the breach team, his rifle steady as they swept through the corridors. They didn't bother capturing ground slowly. They struck at key points: the engine core, the main weapon controls, and the command deck. It was over in less than 15 minutes. The raider flagship's systems went dark and its remaining escorts began to scatter. Without their leader, the formation broke apart. Aboard the Iron Fang, Mason returned to the bridge, sweat on his brow but a satisfied look in his eyes. "Status?" "Raiders are retreating," Harris said. "Some of them are trying to cover their escape, but they're not pressing the attack." Mason leaned back in his chair. "Good. Let them run. The colony needs us more than they do." Down. On Lumerus, the sky began to clear as the raider ships fled into faster-than-light space. Smoke still rose from damaged districts, but the bombardment had stopped. Tilra sent a message to the Iron Fang. "Captain Mason, this is Governor Tilra. You have saved countless lives today. Lumerus owes you a debt we can never repay." Mason's voice came back steady. "You don't owe us anything, Governor. You called for help. We answered. Now let's make sure they never come back." In the background of the transmission, muffled, cheers from the human crew echoed through the comm. But while the battle was over, the war was not. The raiders would return, and the Galactic Council would soon hear that humans had once again crossed into their civilized space. For the people of Lumerus, it didn't matter what the Council thought. What mattered was that the Deathworlders had come when no one else would, and they had fought like demons to protect strangers they had never met. And in the hearts of many on that world, a quiet, dangerous idea began to grow. Maybe it wasn't fear the galaxy should feel toward humans. Maybe it should be respect. The battle was over, but Lumerus did not feel safe. Smoke still curled from the rooftops. The streets were littered with debris and the smell of burned metal hung in the air. Rescue teams moved quickly, pulling survivors from collapsed buildings and carrying the injured to makeshift medical tents. Governor Tilra walked through the main square, speaking to her people and giving what comfort she could. Yet every time, she looked at the sky. She felt uneasy. The raiders would not accept this defeat quietly. In orbit, the Iron Fang was busy as well. Captain Mason had ordered repairs to begin the moment the fighting stopped. Crew members moved across the hull, in magnetic boots, patching holes with spare plates. Inside, engineers worked to fix damaged systems. Harris stood beside Mason at the bridge. "Captain, the raiders will regroup. They've seen what we can do. They won't come with a small force next time." Mason nodded slowly. "Yeah, they'll bring more ships, heavier guns, maybe even try to blockade the planet. We can't hold them off alone." Roger's voice came over the comm from engineering. "And our fuel reserves won't let us run forever, Captain. If we want to fight again, we need supplies and a stronger defense." Mason turned toward Harris. "Open a channel to Governor Tilra." Minutes later, her holographic image appeared before them. She looked tired but alert. "Governor," Mason began, "we bought you time, but the raiders will return. We need to prepare. Together." Tilra hesitated. "Our weapons are few, our soldiers inexperienced. I fear we can't match their strength." Mason gave a small, reassuring smile. "You don't have to match them. You just have to make them regret coming back. My crew will help you. We'll teach your people how to fight in ways they won't expect." Her eyes narrowed. "Deathworlder ways?" "The only kind I know," Mason replied. Over the next days, the humans worked side by side with the colony's defenders. Training began in the open fields outside the city, where alien soldiers learned how to move in small, fast units instead of standing in rigid lines. They practiced using cover, setting traps, and striking from unexpected angles. Rogers helped modify the colony's old farming vehicles, adding armor plates and salvaged turrets from downed raider ships. Harris taught the communications teams how to send false signals to confuse enemy sensors. To the Lumerians, human tactics felt strange. There was no honor in them by galactic standards, no formal duels, no announcements before attacks. Humans fought to win, not to follow tradition. At first, some alien soldiers resisted the new methods. "This is chaos," one officer complained. "We are warriors, not hunters hiding in the grass." Mason overheard him and stepped closer. "When the raiders come, they won't fight fair. They'll burn your homes and kill your families without warning. If you want to survive, you need to be better at being unfair than they are." The officer stared at him for a long moment, then nodded. Meanwhile, the Iron Fang's crew scouted the nearby systems, looking for signs of the raider fleets. Regrouping. On the fourth day, they found it. A formation of ships, larger than before, was gathering near a dead moon 2 jumps away. Harris reported to Mason on the bridge. "Captain, they're building up for another strike. Looks like double the number of ships from last time." Mason tapped his fingers on the armrest. "That's what I expected. They think fear will make the colony surrender, but they're not counting on a fight waiting for them." Back on Lumeris, Governor Tilra met Mason at the newly reinforced defense line. The humans had helped dig deep trenches, set up hidden artillery positions, and plant mines along likely landing zones. "This is not the same city they attacked before," Tilra said, looking over the preparations. Mason nodded. "Good. Now let's give them a welcome they won't forget." 2 nights before the expected attack, the people of Lumeris gathered in the main square. The humans stood among them, sharing food, telling stories, and keeping the mood light. Mason moved through the crowd, checking on his crew. One young Lumerian approached him hesitantly. "Captain Mason, why did you come? You don't know us. The council says your kind is dangerous." Mason looked down at the child, his expression softening. "Maybe we are dangerous, but we're dangerous to the people who think they can hurt others and get away with it. You called for help. That's all we needed to hear." The child smiled and ran back to their family. On the eve of battle, the colony's sensors detected the incoming fleet. Dozens of ships, dark against the stars, were moving in tight formation. The alarm spread quickly through the city. Tilra stood at the command post, watching the display. "Here they come!" Aboard the Iron Fang, Mason's voice came over the comm to the entire colony. "This is it. You know the plan. We hit them fast, we hit them hard, and we don't give them a moment to breathe. Remember, fear is their weapon. Today, we take it away from them." As the raiders entered the system, they saw what looked like a weak defense, just as they expected. But hidden in the shadows of the planet's rings, the Iron Fang waited with its engines cold, invisible to most sensors. Mason grinned as he watched the enemy ships move into range. Time to show them what Deathworlders and Lumerians can do together. And with that, the second battle for Lumeris began. The raider fleet entered orbit with the confidence of predators returning to a wounded prey. From their point of view, the first battle had been an accident, bad luck, one strange human ship getting in the way. Now, with more ships and heavier weapons, they believed nothing could stop them. Their leader, a tall alien with a deep scar across his jaw, stood on the bridge of the flagship. "Burn the city first," he ordered. "Then take what's left." But this time, Lumeris was ready. Hidden artillery batteries buried deep beneath the ground powered up silently. Camouflaged missile pods blended with rooftops and cliff faces. In the hills, Lumerian soldiers crouched behind armored barriers, weapons loaded, and in the shadows of the planet's rings, the Iron Fang floated like a patient hunter. Captain Mason sat in the command chair, eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Hold! Hold!" he muttered. The raiders began their descent toward the main city, moving into the exact flight path the humans had predicted. "Fire," Mason said calmly. Suddenly, the sky erupted. Dozens of surface-to-orbit missiles shot upward, their contrails, carving white lines through the air. Explosions tore across the lead raider ships, shields flaring and collapsing. One destroyer spun out of control, breaking apart before it could even fire a shot. On the ground, Lumerian artillery blasted at incoming troop landers. The weapons roared from hidden positions, catching the raiders completely off guard. The flagship's bridge filled with alarm signals. "Where is this fire coming from?" the scarred leader shouted. Before anyone could answer, the Iron Fang roared out from behind the planet's rings, engines blazing. The human ship dove straight toward the flagship, guns hammering at weak points in the hull. Aboard the Iron Fang, Harris grinned as the railguns pounded. "They weren't expecting us, Captain." "Good," Mason replied. "Let's keep it that way." The raiders scrambled to form a defensive screen, but every time they tried to focus on the Iron Fang, the Lumerian traps forced them to split their attention. One raider frigate moved to intercept the humans, only to fly into a minefield planted by modified farm drones, an idea Rogers had come up with 2 days earlier. In the city streets, small teams of Lumerian fighters darted through alleys, striking at enemy landing craft with hit-and-run attacks. They fought like hunters now, just as the humans had taught them, never staying in one place, never giving the enemy a clear target. On a ridge overlooking the main battlefield, Mason and Tilra coordinated over a secure channel. "They're trying to land heavy walkers on your southern district," Mason reported. Tilra checked her map. "I'll divert our mobile units there. Can you cut off their support ships?" "Already on it," Mason replied. The Iron Fang swung around in a tight arc, charging directly into the path of the raiders' support vessels. Human gunners fired with precision, crippling engines and detonating ammunition stores. The space above Lumeris lit with fire, but the raiders were not without their own cunning. The scarred leader ordered a concentrated push toward the planetary shield generator, knowing it protected the heart of the colony from orbital bombardment. Tilra's voice came urgently over the comm. "Captain, they're going for the shield core." Mason didn't hesitate. "Hold them off for 5 minutes. We're coming down." Minutes later, the Iron Fang broke through the atmosphere, its hull glowing from re-entry. The human ship skimmed, low over the rooftops, weapons blasting apart raider units closing on the shield generator. The colony's defenders cheered as the humans' arrival shifted the momentum. Mason didn't stop there. He set the Iron Fang down in the middle of the district, using it as both a gun platform and a shield for Lumerian forces to regroup behind. Rogers called out from engineering, "Captain, our armor's taken a beating." "It can take more," Mason replied. "Keep firing." Side by side, humans and Lumerians pushed the raiders back from the shield core. Grenade bursts and plasma fire echoed between the buildings. Smoke clouded the air, but through it all, the combined forces held the line. The scarred raider leader, furious at the losses, finally gave the order to retreat. "Pull back! We'll regroup off-world." As the raider ships began to withdraw, the Iron Fang launched one last barrage, ensuring they would not return quickly. Several enemy vessels limped away, trailing fire and debris. In the silence that followed, cheers rose from the streets. Civilians emerged from hiding, embracing soldiers and rescuers. The victory felt real. Earned. Tilra approached Mason near, the base of the shield generator. Her expression was tired, but her eyes were bright. "You've done more than save us, Captain. You've changed us. My people will never be the same." Mason looked around at the Lumerian soldiers, now standing, with confidence. "Good, because the galaxy is a dangerous place. You need to be ready for whatever comes next." But even as the celebration began, Harris approached Mason quietly. "Captain, we intercepted a transmission before the raiders retreated. They weren't acting alone. Someone bigger is backing them." Mason's jaw tightened. "Then this isn't over, not by a long shot." He glanced toward the sky where the last traces of the battle drifted away into space. The humans had come to answer a call for help, but now they knew they might have started a fight far larger than anyone on Lumeris imagined, and Captain Mason had no intention of walking away. The victory over the raiders brought relief to Lumeris, but it didn't last long. Captain Mason's crew had decrypted the intercepted message, and the truth was worse than expected. The raiders were not an independent threat. They were a hired arm of a larger force, the Corval Syndicate, a criminal empire known for crushing resistance with overwhelming power. The message was simple. Failed operation. Send reinforcement fleet. Eliminate targets. Mason stood in the Iron Fang's OS briefing room with Governor Tilra and several Lumerian commanders. A holomap hovered between them, showing a large fleet icon moving toward the colony. "These ships aren't like the ones we fought before," Mason said. "They're bigger, faster, and better armed. If we fight them head-on, we'll be crushed." Tilra frowned. "Then what do you suggest?" Mason leaned forward, his voice steady. "We don't fight them head-on. We fight them the way Deathworlders fight, where, when, and how we choose. We use the terrain, we use their pride against them, and we make them bleed before they even get close to the city." One of the Lumerian officers looked doubtful. "You mean guerrilla tactics? Ambushes? Traps?" "Exactly," Mason said. "We turn this planet into a nightmare for them." The preparations began immediately. The humans showed the Lumerians how to rig false heat signatures in empty canyons, making them look like military camps. They set up hidden charges along narrow valleys, timed to collapse the rock walls on any ship that tried to pass through. Rogers led a team that turned old, mining equipment into automated defense drones, each fitted with salvaged weapons from the last battle. Harris trained a group of Lumerian techs to run constant fake transmissions, making it impossible for the enemy to know where the real defenses were. The Lumerian soldiers, once formal and predictable, began to move like ghosts, vanishing into forests, striking fast, then disappearing again. Mason knew it was only a matter of time before the enemy arrived. 5 days later, the Corval Syndicate fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the system. It was massive. Over 20 warships, flanked by swarms of smaller attack craft. Their flagship was a heavy cruiser bristling with cannons. On its bridge, the Syndicate's commander, a cold-eyed alien named Varric, studied the planet below. "Target the main city first. Show them what happens when they defy us." But the moment the first wave of ships moved in, the traps began to spring. A squadron of enemy bombers entered a narrow canyon, only for hidden mines to explode along the cliff sides, tearing their formation apart. Debris rained down into the valleys. In orbit, a group of fighters broke off to investigate what looked like a Lumerian fleet assembling on the dark side of the moon. But when they arrived, all they found were empty cargo containers emitting heat, signatures, and a wave of missiles launched from the moon's surface. The Iron Fang stayed just out of sensor range, watching and waiting. Mason's crew knew their time to strike would come soon. On the ground, Governor Tilra commanded from the fortified control center. "Report from the southern ridge," she called. A young officer's voice came through. "Enemy troop transports. Spotted. They're trying to land ground forces." Tilra switched the channel to Mason. "Captain, they're coming in heavy on the southern side. If they establish a landing zone, we'll lose the high ground." Mason didn't hesitate. "We're moving in." The Iron Fang dove into the atmosphere, its engines howling. The humans had stripped excess armor to increase speed for this mission, knowing they would need to hit and run. As they crested the southern ridge, they saw the Corval transports lowering through the clouds. Mason's eyes narrowed. "Rogers, fire the cluster mines." Several pods shot from the Iron Fang, scattering small metallic spheres across the air. Moments later, the spheres detonated, releasing a storm of shrapnel and EMP bursts. Enemy transports lost power mid-descent, crashing into the rocky slopes. The surviving ships tried to deploy troops, but Lumerian strike teams, guided by human spotters, were already waiting. Plasma bolts and railgun fire shredded the first wave, before they could even form a defense. Varric watched the battle unfold on his flagship's display, his expression darkening. "This isn't a defense, this is a hunt," he muttered. His tactical officer turned toward him nervously. "Commander, they're forcing us into smaller groups. Every time we push forward, we're ambushed." Varric slammed a clawed hand on the armrest. "Then find their leader. Find this human." Back on the southern ridge, Mason and Tilra met at the front lines. Smoke curled up from the wreckage of the transports, and the ground was littered with the remains of Syndicate. "Machines, they're testing us," Mason said, probing for weakness. "The real push is still coming," Tilra nodded grimly. "And when it comes?" Mason checked his rifle, his eyes cold. "We make them wish they never heard the word Lumeris." As night fell, the humans and Lumerians tightened their defenses. They knew the next assault would be larger, faster, and far more dangerous. Aboard the Iron Fang, Harris reported new movement from the enemy fleet. "Captain, they're massing for a full strike. All ships, all at once." Mason allowed himself a thin smile. "Good. It's easier to hit a target when it's charging straight at you." Outside, the stars above Lumeris glimmered faintly, soon to be lit by fire once more. The biggest battle was still ahead. Dawn broke over Lumeris, but the light brought no peace. The sky shimmered faintly as the planetary shield absorbed distant weapons fire. In the command center, Governor Tilra stood beside Captain Mason, both watching the tactical display. The Corval Syndicate fleet was moving in all at once. Every ship, every weapon, every fighter. "This is it," Mason said quietly. "Their final push." Tilra's voice was calm but heavy. "And ours." The Corval fleet advanced in a massive wedge formation, their ships glowing with the heat of overcharged engines. Heavy cruisers took the lead, followed by swarms of fighters, and far behind, troop transports waited for the signal to land. Aboard the flagship, Commander Varric grinned coldly. "Crush them, break their will. No survivors." But Lumeris was ready. As the enemy fleet drew near, the humans sprang the first trap. Massive mirrors, hidden in orbit behind the planet's moons, pivoted into position. The morning sunlight reflected off them in blinding beams, dazzling the enemy pilots and sensors. "Now!" Mason shouted over the comm. "From the dark side of the planet." The Iron Fang shot forward, leading a swarm of drones built from scavenged parts. The drones were small, fast, and packed with explosives. They zipped straight into the enemy formation, weaving between turbolaser fire before detonating against key ships. In the chaos, the Lumerian artillery opened up from the surface, their fire coordinated with human targeting systems. Enemy shields flared and failed under the constant pounding. The first wave of enemy fighters broke through the upper atmosphere, diving toward the southern ridge. But they didn't find an unprepared defense. Lumerian strike teams were already in place, hidden among rocks and forest. Guided by human spotters, they unleashed a storm of railgun and plasma fire, cutting down the fighters before they could even unload troops. In one section of the ridge, Rogers himself manned an old mining drill converted into a massive rail cannon. Each shot punched through the hulls of enemy landing craft like they were made of paper. "Keep it hot," he yelled to the crew loading the next round. "They're not getting through here." Above, the Iron Fang tangled with the enemy's smaller ships, darting in close where the big cruisers couldn't risk firing. Harris called out from the weapons console. "Captain, they're trying to box us in." Mason's eyes narrowed. "Let them try." He cut the engines abruptly, letting the Iron Fang drift as the enemy ships overshot. Then, with a sudden burst of thrusters, they looped under the enemy formation and blasted their engines from below. Two enemy frigates spun out of control, colliding with each other in a fireball, but the Corval Syndicate was relentless. Their heavy cruisers pushed closer to the planetary shield, bombarding it with concentrated fire. The shimmering barrier began to weaken, ripples running across its surface. In the control center, Tilra heard the shield operator's grim report. "Governor, the core will overload in minutes if this continues." Mason's voice came over the comm. "Then we don't wait for them to break it. We take the fight to their flagship." Tilra looked at him. "That's suicide." "Maybe," Mason said. "But it's the only way to end this before they destroy everything." The Iron Fang broke off from the battle and climbed into high orbit. Enemy ships moved to intercept, but the humans blasted through with reckless precision, taking hits that scorched their armor but never slowed them. "Harris, plot me a direct." "Course to Varick's Bridge," Mason ordered. The human ship tore through the flagship's outer defenses, missiles and railgun rounds hammering the same spot until the shields failed. Then the Iron Fang slammed a boarding tube into the breach. Inside the flagship, the Corval guards barely had time to react before human marines stormed through. Smoke grenades filled the corridors, and the sound of close-quarters fighting echoed. Through the steel halls, Mason led the charge, moving fast toward the command deck. His team cleared room after room, disabling weapons control and jamming communications. When they reached the bridge, Varick stood waiting, flanked by armed guards. "You're the human," Varick said with a sneer. "The one who thinks they can defy the Corval Syndicate." "Not just me," Mason replied. "An entire planet." The fight was quick and brutal. The human team's precision and coordination overwhelmed the guards, forcing Varick to retreat toward the command console. But before he could send any order, Mason's sidearm was aimed at his chest. "Call off your fleet," Mason said coldly. Varick's glare held for a moment. Then he tapped the console. Across the battlefield, Corval ships began to pull back, breaking formation and fleeing into faster-than-light jumps. With the flagship disabled, the battle ended swiftly. The surviving enemy ships scattered, leaving behind wreckage and silence. The planetary shield still stood, damaged but unbroken, on the surface. The people of Lumeris poured into the streets, cheering and embracing one another. Their victory was not just survival. It was proof that they could stand against forces far stronger than themselves. Later, on the steps of the rebuilt council hall, Governor Tilra stood beside Mason as she addressed the crowd. Today we fought, not as prey, but as hunters, she said. And we did not fight alone. When the galaxy turned its back, the Deathworlders came. They taught us to stand. They fought beside us. And because of them, Lumeris lives. The crowd erupted in cheers, many chanting the human's name. Mason simply nodded, not one for speeches. Harris approached him quietly. Captain, you know this isn't over. The Corval Syndicate will want revenge. Mason glanced up at the sky where the last debris of the battle drifted. Let them come. They'll know what waits for them here. And with that, the Iron Fang prepared to leave orbit, its crew ready for the next call for help, wherever it might come from. Because when someone cried out across the stars, Deathworlders answered.